Welcome back to the My Bourbon Journey Whiskey Review channel. My name is Scott. Today we're getting into two whiskeys from Hotel Tango Distilling Company. So first up, we're going to have the Hotel Tango Straight Bourbon Whiskey, followed by their Hotel Tango Straight Rye Whiskey. First, I want to say a big thank you to everybody over at Hotel Tango. This is a veteran-owned and operated distillery. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your services and really everything that you've done for our country and the freedoms that you allow us to express every day, for being able to simply enjoy a great whiskey without having to really worry about too much. So again, thank you so much for all of your service. Greatly appreciated. So getting back to the whiskey specifically, first up we've got the Hotel Tango Straight Bourbon Whiskey. This is coming in at 90 proof or 45% ABV. It is age stated as 2 years on the back. Mash bill on this one was undisclosed, and MSRP is about $50. So we'll move over to the rye whiskey here shortly, but first let's get into their straight bourbon whiskey. So as you can see, kind of a light amber, like light copper type of color on that. And again, I like to move the whiskey around in the glass, check out the oils on it. Not super oily or anything like that, but yeah, let's get into the nose here. Oh boy, so right away a nice cinnamon note to that. Light rye spice on it. Light oak. A little bit of a herbal characteristic, maybe like a black or a green tea. Some light vanilla. Even a little bit of like a green apple there. There's a little bit of that tartness that's there. Some caramel starts to come through a little bit. Some of those light brown sugars. Nice spice, like a nice baking spice on it as well. That oak really kind of starts to come through a little bit, even though it's at least 2 years old. Still getting a nice oak presence. By no means is it over oaked at all. All right, more importantly, let's see how this one tastes. Cheers. Little interesting. So a little bit of a shift from the nose to the palate. Like right away I get this kind of like a dry leather and a sweet tobacco type of note to it. Some of that like a light buttercream as well. So you get hit right away with some of that tobacco, some of the leather, and then here comes some of the sweetness layered into this. Again, some of those caramels start to come through a little bit. Here comes some of that cinnamon that I got originally on the nose. Cinnamon starts to come in a little bit late on this one. Little bit of youth kind of shows through on this one. Not heavy at all. Touch of butterscotch on this. And again, some of that green apple, like a green apple peel. There's a little bit of that tartness that's there to it. And again, that's probably has a little bit to do with some of the youth, but not, it's nice from the standpoint, I'd rather get something like a green apple tartness versus like a youth where you get some of that green grass or the young oak, something along those lines. But this is more of a green apple type of tartness to it. So yeah, it's very fresh and bright. And again, it's kind of coming from that green apple aspect to it. Nice light spice. Some of that oak is still present. Yeah, really nice. It's a different, interesting kind of profile. Still some of the classic, notes are still underlying, but again, you still get some of that green apple aspect to it, a little bit of tartness. It's bright, it's fresh. So I do like that about it quite a bit. So we'll transition over. Now, before I do that, let's get into kind of like the finish part of it. Finish isn't overly long, probably on maybe the longer side of short or kind of shorter side of medium. But again, you're still left with some of that green apple, a little bit of that tartness, Still some of that spice, a little bit of oak that's there. It's actually a nice finish. And I think, again, this would fall into the category of somebody who's looking to transition or get into bourbons. I think this is very approachable. I think it has some good notes to it. Again, not much or really any heat to it. Some different profiles to it, a little bit of that sweetness, the spice, tartness, kind of bright and fresh. So I think this would be really a nice bourbon to kind of start with, or maybe even use in a cocktail from that standpoint. So, all right, so let's go ahead and we'll slide on over to the rye. And I always, when I'm doing a side-by-side, I'll always start with the bourbon and then shift over to the rye, just because rye in itself can be a little bit more dominant. You don't want it to affect the profile of the bourbon. So, all right, so let's get into that. So, all right, let me shift over here. So a little bit of information on this first. So the rye is kind of stepped up a little bit. So this is now coming in, again, this is their Hotel Tango straight rye whiskey. This is coming in at 100 proof or 50% ABV. Again, age stated as 2 years on the back of the bottle. Mash bill, again, undisclosed. And MSRP for this one is the same as the bourbon, about $50. So yeah, let's go ahead and we'll kind of get into the review of this. So color-wise, you can see fairly similar to the bourbon, kind of that light, light amber, light gold type of color. But as I move the whiskey around in the glass on this one, this is showing a little more oily than the bourbon was. So I do like to see that. I think anytime you see those oils, hopefully that translates over to the palate and they're more, more flavor for the most part. So, all right, let's get into the nose on this. All right, so a little bit on this one. So this is kind of a little bit of that light dill, but starts to kind of shift actually over to more spearmint than dill. A little bit of cinnamon kind of comes out in this one. That rye spice really kind of kicks in pretty hard there. So as it began to kind of open up a little bit, that rye spice really kind of amped up on it too. And the cinnamon on this is more along the lines of like a cinnamon red hot to me. A little bit of an herbal characteristic too. And generally speaking, you get that a lot of times in rye when you're starting to get the dills and the spearmint, you get that like herbalness to it. Again, some of that tartness is kind of coming through on this one as well. Yeah, it's very fresh and bright. That's one consistent thing with both of them, is that they're very kind of fresh smelling, bright, floral, they're open. All right, more importantly, let's see how this one tastes. Cheers. So similar to the nose, it's a little bit of a blend of dill and spearmint, a little heavier on the spearmint side, which is something I favor a little bit more than the dill side, but a really nice spice to that. A little bit of oak, that rye spice really kind of kicks in again like it did on the nose. Some nice vanillas and caramels that are there. Again, some of that tartness that's there. There's a little bit of that like kind of green apple peel tartness, that freshness, kind of very bright from that standpoint. Still some of those underlying vanillas and caramels that are there as well. A really nice, I think both of these fall into the category of nice, easy sipping whiskeys, and I think both would do fairly well in cocktails. For me, especially the rye whiskey, I think would hold up with that spice that's there on this one. Yeah, again, some of that spearmint really kind of comes through. A little bit drying, a little bit of that leather and tobacco kind of start to come through as the finish begins to develop. Nice lingering spice on this one. Touch more heat with it being 100 proof. Allows the finish to kind of linger a little bit longer. So overall, I really am liking their rye whiskey. Not to say I didn't like the bourbon. I think there's a little bit more there with the rye. I like that extra 10 proof on this one. 100 proof kind of becomes a little bit of a magic number with whiskeys, is that things really begin to kind of develop at that 100 proof point. So I do like the fact that they kind of bumped up the rye whiskey to 100 proof. Finish wise, I'd say it's nice lingering spearmint, oak, really nice spice kind of continues to be there. Some of that sweetness, the vanillas, the caramels are there. Overall, again, I think it's a really nice rye whiskey. I think they've done a good job. And again, this is their own in-house distillate. They're not sourcing anything. So this will be one to kind of keep an eye on, monitor how things are going. Hopefully some things will continue to age a little bit more and so on. So with that being said, thank you so much again to the guys over at Hotel Tango for providing the bottles for me to do a review of today. And as always, if you'd like to help support or contribute to the channel, you can through my Patreon page, which I'll have linked in the description below. Also find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all at My Bourbon Journey. You can check me out there. Also, one other thing, if you've experienced this, I'm always, again, interested to hear people's thoughts and feedback on the particular whiskeys that I'm reviewing. So if you've had this, leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on this. And then finally, again, thank you so much for the guys over at Hotel Tango for your service to the country. Again, my hat's off to everybody who has served in any capacity. We thank you again from the bottom of our heart. So with that being said, again, thank you so much for tuning into another one of my reviews. And remember, it's about the journey and not the destination. Cheers.